utilize a program in the elementary. So we have utilized a similar program for our kids that can be, it's like an asynchronous platform. Some of you might be familiar with iReady for math. It's similar, but it's for Mandarin. Not like a Duolingo that you might have on your app if you're trying to learn a language, but we also still continue to utilize that. One area that we are continuing to develop is that support in science. So our Mandarin-speaking para is working with the science teacher. Principal Akbari had some foresight when moving into the middle school. He worried that we might not have the support we needed in science. So he piggybacked it with a gen ed science course as well, because as you can also imagine, a Mandarin-speaking science teacher is also difficult. So knowing that our kids are in a 6th grade science class, so utilizing that para-educator to build in, so when they're doing a science lesson, they can be bringing in the vocabulary in Mandarin for our students. We're even talking about redesigning some of our products so that when kids create their lab response, maybe they're not writing it in English, they're doing components in Mandarin. When they're doing oral response, giving it in Mandarin, and then the para-educator can serve as the translator to the classroom teacher. So there's been a lot of creative problem solving for this, and based on how we see this digital prep this spring working out, that could lead to the community deciding we like that, we want to continue, it'll give us some consistency, or perhaps there are teachers who apply for the position. We have had folks reach out to us. Again, few and far between. People are also in contracts. And so it's often difficult for a teacher to be let out of an existing contract. So looking to hire for the fall would be our end goal.
Thank you.
Okay. Final question. Are there any limitations to who can volunteer at schools or in the classroom besides parents? So grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, et cetera.
So I believe it's going to be a future agenda topic for SBC to talk about the volunteer process, but the distinction between visitor and volunteer is important. Visitors intermittent on the campus for maybe an event or something. So we need to know that you're on campus. Student safety and security is a top priority. So when someone's volunteering, if they're more engaged, if they're working with small groups of students, then we expect that they're fingerprinted, that we have some clearance. Parents don't have to be fingerprinted, but we also do background checks to make sure we don't have someone, for example, that's got a background that would cause us to not allow them to work with students out of the direct line of sight of a certified teacher, for example. So it sort of depends on the nature of the volunteer work. If you're coming in to work on one of the community gardens, for example, not working directly with students, that's different than if you're working with a subset of students on a project that's assigned by a teacher. So it depends on the nature of the volunteer work. We really do encourage parents as best and as much as they can to be engaged in the learning with their students. We also recognize that others may want to contribute, but that's also directed by the building administrator and teachers. Good intentions can sometimes disrupt the natural learning process, and so they need to determine when volunteers are helpful and when, in fact, they might not be helpful. And so it's really site by site, classroom by classroom, but we do have a process for supporting volunteers on our schools.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I have to run. Happy New Year, and I know you'll have a great presentation with Kim and Diane.
Are we live streaming now? Okay, so I just want to acknowledge for anyone watching on YouTube now or later, we started the live stream late. We will be posting detailed minutes for what happened in the meeting before the live stream started. Okay, so up next, we're going to hear from Dr. Kim Dodds-Karan and Diane Murphy about curriculum adoption.
Okay, hello again, everyone. I'm Kim, Director of Teaching and Learning. This is Diane, one of our instructional coaches. She focuses on elementary English language arts, and we are excited to share with you today some information about the curriculum adoption process. Along the way, we are going to involve you with some questions and Don't worry, there is not a test or anything like that, but we do want to make sure that you can become a voice for our community to share information about curriculum adoptions. And so as we look into the room, we do recognize some familiar faces. So raise your hand or stand proudly if you have served or are currently serving on a curriculum adoption review committee.
Yay! Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
How many people have an idea of what was our most recent curriculum adoption that the board approved? Michael. English
Ding, ding,
Language
ding,
Arts.
got it.
So, Diane.
And the picture up there is a picture of a few of the 40 people on that particular committee that lasted 10 months. So it was the longest adoption we've ever done. Just fabulous people, and really, really proud of everything the committee did.
So today we have a few goals that we hope you walk away with understanding the importance of curriculum adoptions. We want you to understand the alignment to state statute and our board policies. We want you to learn the processes followed for curriculum adoptions, the roles and responsibilities of district and parent community stakeholders in curriculum adoption processes, and we also want to talk a little bit about the funding that supports curriculum adoptions.
All right, well, this slide just goes over, there's been a lot of research in the last few years that's looked at, really research for many years, on something called HQIM, which is the acronym for High Quality Instructional Materials. And these are just three important things when they talk about what a high quality instructional materials, what the research, and it's a growing, compelling research, and a base that's looking at it all the time. And they have found that when you use really good high quality instructional materials, student outcomes are equal to or greater than many interventions that are often much more costly. It is so much, it's cost neutral really to do the best job we can with Tier 1. One of my favorite sayings with Tier 1 is you can't solve our problems with Tier 2 and Tier 3. If we're really looking to move the needle with our kids, we really need to do it with our Tier 1 materials, because that touches all kiddos. The Tier 2 and Tier 3 are important for those kids that that struggle with the Tier 1, but our Tier 1 really should be the basis for everything for that. Studies have also shown that high-quality instructional materials allow students to engage more deeply and meaningfully rather than something the teacher just designs on their own at home at night. And nothing against that, but teachers are not curriculum writers. We went to school to know how to engage students, how to teach students, how to instruct. We didn't really have classes on how to develop curriculum. So that's why it's important to buy and purchase and look at really great instructional materials that way. And research has shown that students in general can gain up to 2 months of learning when teachers use really strong instructional materials. So it ends up being that high quality instructional materials is not only effective but very cost neutral as well. So when we get more into it, and though I'm here because the most recent adoption that we had was the elementary ELA. So this is still real fresh in my mind as we're going through this. But there's some legislation that really guides us in what we need to do when it comes to textbook adoptions. And it's ARS 15721 and 15722. And the three main points of these are: 1, governing board shall approve textbooks, supplemental materials, teaching aids, and computer softwares. The committee does not approve the materials. They make a recommendation. And that's always a really important thing for the committee to know. They're not saying, well, this is what we picked. They pick something to recommend to the governing board, but it's still the governing board's responsibility, no matter what the committee says, to make that final decision. Also, an important part of the laws is open meeting laws. All of our meetings are, for all the adoptions, are put 24 hours in advance, so you know the location, the time, and the agenda of what we're doing. And any member of the public is welcome to attend those meetings. And then there's also, once the materials come in, because there is a long process, because we first have to come up with the criteria and the rubrics, but once the materials start to arrive from publishers, They are open for public inspection for 60 days. With what we're hoping the public will do is give feedback. And public includes everyone from students, if they want to teachers, to parents, and community members giving feedback on those materials.
And to add a little bit to that as well, you can kind of think of some of these statutes as the hub, and there's others that fork off. So we also have some board policy. So a year ago, there was some board policy put into place, because in a minute we'll talk about creating committees. And when we do a lot of work to recruit and get people to volunteer, so those of you who have, thank you. It is a large time commitment. As Diane mentioned, the English Language Arts curriculum adoption was a 10-month process. We'll touch on that in a minute too. Some of you might be thinking, I am not involved in a 10-month process. And some of you were in a 10-month, some of you are not. And so the board policy states that 50% of the committee must be comprised of teachers. And that is really important for us, because we do want the teachers to have a voice in the materials that are going to be in their classrooms, that they're going to be utilizing. They know their kids. But the perspective that a parent brings in or a community member brings in is very important as well. Experts like an instructional coach, a resource specialist, an enrichment teacher, an ELD teacher, a gifted specialist, their perspective is really important too, because they're thinking about a different stakeholder group as well. So that is really important for us as well. Along the way, there's other laws that might also impact things. So for example, with the English Language Arts curriculum adoption.
Move on when reading.
Move on when reading. In Arizona, we have state legislation associated with move on when reading for kids K-3. And by the end of 3rd grade, it is an expectation that children are proficient at reading. So we have to think about, what does Move On When Reading require? It requires an evidence-based curriculum that is state approved. We could have a myriad of resources that are submitted to us, but if they are not on the ADE approved list of instructional materials, we can't look at that. Similarly, when we do an advanced placement, AP or IB, International Baccalaureate, College Board and Cambridge also have some criteria for their advanced placement and their IB curriculum. So while there might be a Diane Murphy product that is amazing, if it is not approved by the College Board, we can't utilize it, because we want to be sure that we are preparing our students for the course and the syllabus that is College Board approved in their classroom. So there are some of those other nuances. In addition, there's legislation for sexually explicit content. So we want to be mindful of what does that look like? Doesn't mean we can't teach it, but how are we going to be prepared to inform families? So all of that is also layered in, and part of the work of the committee to be evaluating how will this impact teaching and learning in our classrooms. So all of this, though, I think is really important that we think about. We adopt resources typically every 5 to 7 years. SUSD is in a wonderful position for many reasons that I'll talk about, but I want to think a little bit about our strategic plan and the goals that we have for our strategic plan with academic excellence, culture and climate, optimizing our resources. So we are fortunate in SUSD to have this guiding light for us about what we believe is important to create a strong, cohesive system. So those goals for the strategic plan, as well as the key performance indicators that our governing board has set for us, also influence what we are going to be doing when selecting materials. So if we're thinking about world-class, future-focused learning, what does that look like? What types of instructional materials do we need to be adopting to align with the goals we have for our strategic plan in expectation of achieving the KPIs that we have for our school district? So typically a curriculum adoption takes place every 5 to 7 years. You will find that that's not always the case. There's all sorts of things that may preclude any of us from doing so, like maybe a pandemic. Although I will say I was not in SUSD at that time, but I can tell from the records that the committees actually continued to meet for curriculum adoptions, but they did so on Teams. So I can see what those meetings look like and those meeting agendas as well. But what's important too is there's an evolution. You know, things are constantly changing. So as standards change, in 2016 the math standards changed. Technology has changed. I don't know that I'm the only one in this room, but when I went to school, my textbook was not online. My textbook I got from the bookshelf or I got out of my backpack. You didn't log on for anything when I went to school. Maybe I logged on for Oregon Trail in the summer or something like that on my CD-ROM. But however, now a lot of our resources are digital, and we have one-to-one initiatives. So we want to be thinking about, is the curriculum that we're utilizing going to support a one-to-one initiative? We've also learned a lot along the way, too, with if I'm buying a product, is that going to keep me in the product, or does it take me out to the World Wide Web? And I'm accessing a resource somewhere else, and how do we work with our technology team to make sure that our filters are filtering out anything that might be out there on that really big web? So every 5 to 7 years, we are typically completing a curriculum adoption.
So let me give you an example for ELA. Our last adoption before the one we went through this past year was in 2015. And then all of a sudden, and the thing is, between 2015 and now, there were changes to legislation. The standards didn't change, but legislation, according to Move On When Reading, changed. And the science of reading, and we became what's called a science of reading state. So because of all that, it really influenced the way teachers need to teach. So we had to really look at our materials to say, do they align now, not just with best practices and evidence-based, but do they also align with the legislation?
So I'm going to take you in a moment to a landing spot that I want you to become familiar with. We call it Committee Hub. It's a spot where all information for our curriculum adoptions is housed. We also have a curriculum adoption site, but Committee Hub is a good core. Throughout this presentation, we threw in a few pictures because we also want to highlight the scope. So sometimes our committee work is small. For example, a year ago, the governing board approved for this school year a new course in high school, AP European History. The course is being offered at Saguaro High School. One teacher, one class. So that curriculum adoption was really small in scope because, one, we were limited because it was College Board, so we couldn't have a million resources coming our way, only College Board approved resources, and it was one teacher. We reached out and we had another teacher on the committee who wants to be teaching the class next year. So that committee was comprised of 5 people, 2 teachers, 2 community members, and a coach. Very small. Diane's most recent English language arts curriculum adoption,
350 teachers and about 7,000 students. So really big difference.
for the impact.
Yeah.
In terms of committee members, you had
About 40.
So scope can change. Sometimes, too, we do things in phases. So we've been doing secondary science for 2 years now. So if you were to look at our middle school planning guide and our high school planning guide, we have 6th grade science, 7th grade science, 8th grade science. We have biology, zoology, botany, physics, astrophysics, AP, IB. You get the gist. So science is taking 2 years to chunk it out because it would be impossible for us to try to do all things science in 1 year. So want you to have that kind of as a frame of reference too. So every coach who becomes a co-lead on the project, we all follow the same process, but there are different nuances because of the course content. So Jill's AP European History, much smaller in scope. Diane's 10-month K-5 ELA curriculum adoption, much larger in scope. Okay, so I'm gonna take you to Committee Hub. For those of you who are on a committee, I know you've been to Committee Hub. If you haven't been to Committee Hub, for me, when I go to our district website, I'm a logical sequential learner. So for me, it's easiest to go to departments where everything then is ABC ordered, and I go to C for committees, and you can click on committees, and there you'll find Committee Hub. On Committee Hub, you are going to see what we are currently recruiting for, what is in progress, what are standing committees, and then, Diane, if you'll scroll to the bottom, it'll also show what committees have already taken place and are no longer active, okay? And we keep those up for people to continue to see. So Diane, if you'll scroll to maybe science that's going on right now on the top. So currently we have Cheyenne K-5 math curriculum adoption, secondary world language, which is, again, perfect example of scope. Italian 1 and 2, AP Japanese, French 4, and dual language immersion K-5 for Pueblo. That's going on right now for secondary world language. But again, AP Japanese, 1 teacher. Italian 1 and 2. We have a community member who speaks Italian. How great is that? So we have a community member on that committee. And dual language immersion at Pueblo K-5 is more of like an elective, if you will. It's not like we're looking for a replacement English language arts curriculum. We're teaching kids Spanish in the dual language immersion program. And then we also have science. So Diane, if you'll click on science, just for you to see an example of how we log everything and also an example of scope. So we always have our purpose, where our materials are, and what products we currently have. So this has a lot. This is science right now that we are reviewing. So it's organized by, can you scroll a little higher, Diane? Sorry, there you go, perfect. AP Environmental Science, thank you. Environmental Science, Earth, Space Science, Honors Earth and Space Science, Oceanography, Astronomy, Astrophysics, Zoology, Botany, Honors Zoology, Botany. So all of these products have been sent to us, and we'll talk about that process in a minute. And on the right, Diane, if you'll scroll to where we do all of our minutes and such. So along the right-hand side of Committee Hub, every member of the community or a participant on the committee can revisit all of our materials that are listed here. So we always post our meeting agendas, as Diane previously mentioned, 24 hours prior to our meeting taking place. Our presentations that we utilize to facilitate either the introduction training or updates that are going on that we want to bring to our committee. We include those PowerPoints, and then we also take meeting minutes. The committee also, every meeting, approves the meeting minutes, and we post our meeting minutes. But the process for becoming part of a curriculum adoption committee starts with people volunteering. And so all teachers, all community members, all specialists would go on to this website. If this committee weren't live right now, there would simply be information about the purpose of our committee, what our meeting dates are going to be, and click here if you'd like to apply. It's a Google form. People fill it out. Dr. Menzel mentioned earlier about the human growth and development that we didn't have representation from all learning communities. That is very common. So what we do as Committee Hub is posted and we are seeking people to participate. When we see that there is a learning community or a school, for example, with Diane, she wanted every school represented. If we see schools don't have volunteers, we reach out to the principal. We ask the principal if we're needing parents. Can you please work with your parent organization? Can you please work with your community specialist to try to recruit people to participate? Because our goal truly is to get as much stakeholder input as possible, because we want this to be an informed and supported decision. And so we keep an eye on that. And then what we do when we were at Cheyenne, for example, before the committee was formed at the PTO meeting said, how many people will you take? And at that time, we could see how many people had applied. So I said, if you've applied, mark your calendar. Because more often than not, we are really digging deep to get people to commit. And it's not because people don't want to participate, it's because it's a lot of time. And so for those of you who have been able to volunteer, thank you. For those of you who are thinking about volunteering, I promise you it's time well spent. But we do, more often than not, take as many people as we can. Again, we do have that board policy that does say 50% of the committee must be comprised of teachers. So if we did have far more community members and parents than we did teachers, we would have to say to a few community members that they couldn't be part of the committee, but they're always welcome to be present. So step 1 is recruitment. Step 2 then is once our committee forms, we do some background work. In addition to just sharing some information about legislation, depending on the content, we're going to talk about what are the expectations for the AP course? What are the standards in that content area? What is our achievement looking like in the content area using our current products? Where do we see some gaps? What are we noticing? What might we want to be aware of when we're looking at the materials? Then the committee works to create criteria that we want to send out to all of our publishers. So we have partners in our warehouse. They're part of our teaching and learning team, and they do a lot of work with all of our curriculum vendors and our publishers. So we send out to all of the people in our archives, or, for example, AP Japanese, hard to find textbooks, really hard to find textbooks. So our AP Japanese teacher is in a forum for College Board, so she paid attention to what people all over the country are using, and we were able to reach out to say, oh, hey, in Nebraska, they're utilizing this publisher that isn't typically on our list, so we would reach out to them. So we do a lot of work to reach out to as many vendors and publishers as possible with our criteria that each committee establishes, so that they will submit to us for review product that aligns with what we are looking for.
Kim, can I jump in for a second as an example for the ELA K-5 one? The state basically tells us they have a list of vendors that are approved, and so we made sure that list went out to all of them. Not every curriculum has that, but for ELA, that's what we did. We sent it to everyone, but we also made sure that every single one on that list had the opportunity to submit for us.
Yep. Mike? I think probably that way. Okay, we might answer it. You never know. Okay, thank you, though. Yeah, hang on to that. So then after we establish our criteria, then the committee does some work to design rubrics. So again, some content areas have some rubrics that are established through national organizations like the National Council for Mathematics, for example. They might have a rubric. Science has some rubrics that we can benchmark from, because that's when the work really begins of reviewing by page, by video, by story. English Language Arts did stories. They did simulations of lessons. What would this look like, feel like? What's the timing like, the pacing like in the classroom? And we evaluate utilizing a Likert scale of that product. And then as a group, we decide, all right, these are the products we really like. We want to invite those vendors in to present to us. And we want to learn more about the product, because as we're learning about it, we're maybe taking some notes. As a group, we're debriefing and we have some unanswered questions. That's our chance. They're going to bring in their sales team. They're going to bring in maybe a teacher from another district or state that utilizes the product, and we get to ask them all sorts of questions. We have an IT checklist that we utilize from Dr. Watt's team to make sure that when we integrate into Clever, everything's going to be seamless so kids can access things, teachers can access things on their computers. Simultaneous to all of this, though, is public review. So all of the product is on display in a space for public review. And Diane mentioned how important it is to get feedback. So when people come in for public review, they can log on to a Google form and let us know what they saw when they were looking at the curriculum. Similar to us trying to recruit for serving on committees, we try really hard to get people to come in and give us feedback. Sometimes people will physically come take a look, but they don't give us feedback. So even today, with our products that are on display, we have somebody who hasn't been on our display campus for Cheyenne Math. And when I spoke with that coach, I said, please, if anybody comes today, yes, I want them to take a look at the material. But if they spend 2 hours looking at the materials, ask them, please, to go to the Google form. Let us know what they liked. Let us know what they didn't like. Because what we do when we get that feedback is we bring it to the committee. And we say, hey, we had 3 people come in. This is what they looked at. This is their feedback. And that feedback might be something that the committee also saw and thought, yep, this is something we want to think about. Or it could be something that they hadn't even noticed and they weren't aware of. So we really want that feedback to either support that we're going in the right direction or to help us be aware of something that we hadn't seen. So if you could help us and encourage people to visit our public displays and give us feedback, that would be really helpful.
Is there an information placard that says at the thing,
Yes.
this is how you give feedback, please give us feedback?
Yes.
Because I didn't notice it when I looked at some of the, it might have been there, I just didn't see it.
It is.
It is there.
It is there. And there's QR codes to scan. Yep, yep. So that is good though. So maybe we need to do a better job at, I think actually this year for science and world language, we put fluorescent sticky notes that say like, read me. So that's good feedback. So then once the publishers come, the committee listens to the presentations, then the group comes to consensus. And every team within our teaching and learning department has also come to consensus on what is consensus. And we facilitate a process where everybody walks away supporting the recommendation that we are going to take to the governing board. Sometimes it's a real quick process. Sometimes it's a, hold on, we gotta take a few minutes to breathe and work it out, and then we all come to consensus, but we come to consensus and then we go to the governing board. When we go to the governing board, we go to the board twice. We go first time, what we call first read, and that's where we give the governing board all of the background on the work of the committee and what our ultimate recommendation is. That recommendation also includes the proposed cost. That's something that coaches, purchasing, DD in our department are working with our reps from that product that we've selected. We work with CIMAR to do projected enrollment so we can be informed when making a decision to buy 5 years, 7 years worth of a product. So we go to the governing board first time, they give us feedback, we answer their questions, then we go again for what's called second read and approval, and then the board approves that recommendation, and then we begin the next layer of work of the contract and legal and working with our reps in order to begin to purchase the materials. Then more work begins. Pallets upon pallets upon pallets start arriving to the warehouse, and everything starts to get barcoded and logged into a system called Destiny. In the meantime, teachers are having to clean out their cupboards of all of their old materials. So I imagine you've all been to Costco and like you've bought a watermelon and they're in those really big cardboard things. We ship those off to schools. So your teacher librarians and your library resource specialists are scanning all of the current curriculum into Destiny, popping it into boxes, shipping it back to the warehouse so we can discard that product in order to make room for new product. So our warehouse is like Costco, and it's got steel racks full of curriculum. So while we have been busy all year, the next work begins at the warehouse for barcoding and scanning in, and then disseminating to all of our campuses all of the new product or all of the new manipulatives in science, all of the eyedroppers, googly eyes, cotton balls, you name it, is all getting prepared to be in the hands of our students for use in the classroom. So Committee Hub, if you aren't ever visiting that spot, please do. Cheyenne K-5 Math is currently underway. World Language, Dual Language Immersion, and Science are currently underway. We do want you to know, as Scottsdale Parent Council reps, how important parents are as partners to us in this work. And I think that when we are together, we get to build relationships, we get to see folks more regularly, and we get to learn what's important. We want feedback, and it's a great opportunity to then know that you can connect with your classroom teacher. Because once we have a new product, we want to encourage all families to go to their curriculum nights, their parent-teacher conferences, their open houses, so that people can see what our products are. Even after public display ends, here at district office, we have every product. So if somebody wants to come in to review an instructional material, on our curriculum page, we have a link. You click on it and say, I want to come in and check out the AP Econ book that was adopted a year ago. Fantastic. They fill out that form. We get it ready for them. They come in and they view it. If it's a digital material, we get them set up on a computer, and they can view the digital material on the computer. And then lastly, I think our last slide is a huge thank you to our community. Scottsdale Unified School District is truly blessed beyond measure, no pun intended, by voting for a capital override. So because we have capital override dollars, we work with our finance department. And there's a capital planning budget team that works to set how much money will we have. So I present to Shannon and Mario and the whole team, we are going to need curriculum for X, Y, Z. I anticipate it will cost blank. And then the committee decides, yep, we can allocate those dollars this year for you. Or we can give you this year, next year we can give you this. So work within your budget for the given products you need. So K-5 ELA was a very large adoption. If you haven't gathered that, I've said it a million times. But that was a $3.6 million project. We're doing AP Japanese. Maybe that's going to be $10,000. So again, scope varies. So when I'm working within the budget with our coaches, we're cognizant, but we also are blessed to have the funding to buy the very best products to have in the classroom for teachers to be equipped to teach our kids. So thank you for those of you who have voted. And when it comes on the ballot again in a few years, let's get out that good word too. So with that, questions, and I know, Michael, you have a question.
You were talking about the Desert Canyon Middle School and bringing in the Mandarin into the science. Is that a curriculum addition that needs to go through a committee, or if not, why not?
Good question. Great question. The Mandarin science curriculum is not a different science curriculum. It's a translated curriculum. So if we have a FOSS science kit, it's no longer in English. It would be in Mandarin. And the previous teacher spent all summer translating lessons. Same curriculum in Mandarin.
Curriculum translated.
Correct.
So you recently awarded, I think, 4 contracts for the K-5 ELA and math digital resources.
Mhm.
Did that go through a committee review process, and if not, why not?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have brought that back to you. Question about a K-5 intervention curriculum, which was a personalized learning curriculum for English, language arts, and math. That product went through what's called an RFP, request for proposal. We use our purchasing team. We write a scope of work, what our objectives are, and then through our purchasing department, they push out to, similar to how Dee Dee does it with letters, pushes out to vendors what we are looking for, what our objective is, what our scope of work is. And then products who believe they meet our scope of work submit, and then a committee reviews utilizing a rubric, a digital rubric, all of the submissions. That then goes to our director of purchasing. He reviews it. They have some calculations that I don't know, Roger would have to answer that component, about the funding, the cost of the product, and then it then tabulates all of our scores to lead to a recommendation that we then take to the governing board, and then the governing board approves the products.
What committee reviewed that? I guess my point is, why is that material, which is going to be used in conjunction with the K-5 ELA, which went through a 10-month process, and the math, which went through a committee process, OML, and all of that?
Yep.
How is that material that was solicited in the RFP and awarded for vendors different than the material in the previous
Sure.
ELA committee?
So this is a personalized digital curriculum. So we were looking for a product that could be used as an intervention resource for students. So there's a diagnostic associated, and then it's a pathway. Things that you might be familiar with, like on your computer, like Khan Academy. So a Khan Academy is a free resource where you would take a diagnostic and it's going to put you on a path. So with this as an intervention, because it's a supplemental, it is not a tier 1 core curriculum adoption, we're able to utilize the RFP process.
So you're saying that the 721, 722, and even 711, 15 dashes give you that exemption?
Correct. So this is not a tier 1 core curriculum adoption. We were purchasing a supplemental material.
Because not every student will see it, or not every student will utilize it, just the kids that need it.
That's a good clarifying. So a supplemental material is something that could be used. So a teacher could choose to use it. I have a student who is struggling, I want to put them on this. Or it could be, I only want it for this particular group of students. It's what we call a supplemental. We did that mid-year, but to the point of supplementals, we take supplemental materials to the governing board every spring. So every supplemental material that is for English language arts, science, math, social studies, gifted, ELD, fine arts, PE, we take special education. We take all of those to the governing board for their approval. Many of them are renewals. Last year we didn't have anything new that we were adding as supplemental, so it was just a continuation of what already existed.
And Tier 1, the goal of Tier 1, and this is based upon a lot of research, is you expect at least 80% of your kids to be able to be successful with a Tier 1 material. We know there's always going to be some students who struggle with that. So that's where we do need that supplemental. It is not meant for everyone. It's meant for those kids that may fall through the net a little bit. We want to have that extra net for them to catch them on it. So it's not a full-fledged adoption for everyone. It is just, yeah, like a supplemental.
So you're saying 721 and 22 and 711 give an exemption for tier, because I don't see tier 1 mentioned in that.
Yeah.
And I'm
So
happy,
I would
Michael-
like to, we have other parents in the audience, and they have said that they're following statute and policy, and if you have questions about that, it sounds like you need to direct it to a legislator, not them. So if any other parents have questions, please raise your hand.
But I will also tell you, our director of purchasing is always available to answer procurement questions. Perfect.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, who chooses committee members and how do they choose those committee members?
Thank you for asking. That's a great question. So the co-leads, so let's pretend it's Diane and I for the K-5 ELA adoption. We would download, when the committee hub closes, we would download that spreadsheet. We'd see if we have to go try to recruit. Once we have all of our folks, we then review. We know for English language arts that one of the questions is you know, why are you interested in this committee, and how is your work or your experience related to the work of this committee? So often we get people who have been a teacher, we get people who in science are a scientist or work in that industry or have a passion for. So we review that. Again, we more often than not are taking everyone who has applied, but we look at what we are looking for in terms of the goals of the committee, and then we take it to Dr. Benson, because per our policy is there needs to be approval from 3 people of what our recommendation. So we're really looking for a balance of every learning community. We're trying to get either every grade level represented, or again, if it's a more niche like an AP or an IB, we're trying to get that teacher to be represented. And then for community, we're trying to get parents and we're trying to get community stakeholders as well.
Can I give an ELA example? So for this last one, I did have to turn a few teachers away. We had what I was looking for, but we came up with the criteria ahead of the time before anyone applied. So I wanted to make sure I had teachers from at least one primary and intermediate from each learning community. I wanted to make sure I had teachers with lots of experience and brand new teachers. So I had a whole list of criteria. And then when we looked at the list, and by the grade levels and by community members, I took the names off, and I'm sorry, not communities, learning communities, thank you. I took the names off and just looked at all those other criteria to come up with it. And for that one, we did take every single one of the parents that applied.
And just to add, when Diane just mentioned looking for a beginning teacher and a veteran teacher, a specialist, a generalist. So having been teachers for a long time, we can look at a curriculum and see, okay, this is how I'm going to make it work. For that first year, second year teacher, they see it as, this is a lot of curriculum, how do I make it work? And that is a neat discussion that takes place within the committee as well, because we do, again, I've said it several times, we want perspective. We also want some of the things that we've heard, and I know some people kind of question why we think that this is important, but we do. We've had parents say, this is a really big book. My child is going to be expected to take this to and from school. Could we buy a class set and have an at-home set. So those are conversations we have also because we want it to be user-friendly. We want the teacher to use it. We want the students to use it. We want it, consumables. Consumables are always a really big topic because that means we buy them every year. Or that means in kindergarten, somebody, parent volunteer, is ripping out every page because if you've helped your kindergartner tear on that perforated line, what happens? That's why we have tape. You know, so those are, we think about so many different components within a curriculum adoption. Dr. Benson?
Can I hop in real quick and thank you all for being here? And I love that we have this on the slide in front of us because had we not had community support for years and years and years, these conversations about adopting curriculum don't even happen. So just incredible that Scottsdale continues to have community backing to allow us to have capital override funding to pursue adoptions. Dr. Dodds Karen and our Diane Murphy have done a great job of talking through how we select most of our curriculum committees. There's a whole nother layer of committee, advisory committee for the sex ed adoption that looks a little bit different in that the final decision making about who's on the committee will be by the governing board, and that happens on January 30th. It's a whole nother layer of, we have lots of legislation we have to follow, and there are a handful of different pieces of legislation, not just one, for the sex ed adoption that we have to be mindful of. So we've got legislation, we've got admin code from the State Board of Ed, and we have governing board policy. So we have all three that we have to be affording attention to, as Mike Banger and I have had conversations about too. It's robust. So that one is a little bit different. If you hear that, we'll be reaching out to those that applied to that committee to make sure they're aware of the why, so they're not surprised on January 30th too, because it typically doesn't go to the governing board to help us decide. I do want to do one quick shout out and put in a little plug. This morning I got to be at Safeway Albertsons at Chaparral and Hayden, and they distributed checks to a whole host of our schools, $2,000 to almost every school, Saguaro Learning Community and Coronado Learning Community, in addition to the marching band and the cheer teams. They had separate checks too. I have goosebumps. So we had a couple principals that are actually off-site learning, so I brought their checks back. But the bulk of our schools were there. So if you need to do a little grocery shopping, the fact that they just gave $2,000 to each of our schools, pretty remarkable. So it's a grand opening today. There's lots of celebration and free coffee and that kind of thing. So just doing a little shout out to a community partner so we can reciprocate that support. Very, very cool. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, I think our time,
So I have two quick questions.
Okay.
First of all, I was really interested in being on the committee for the science part. I myself, I'm a biologist, and I worked in the district for garden stuff for a long time. So I was really interested, but I couldn't find it. I asked the principal at Arcadia, I said so many times to her, where is that? How can I find it? She didn't know anything about it. So it might help us all, because this is really, really important. I mean, that's the basic of what we are doing here. So maybe there would be a possibility to announce that a little bit more in all kinds of ways, you know, now with the new parent stuff we have online, to really let people know, first about the committee, to sign up for the committees, and secondly then for like taking a look at the materials, what you mentioned before, and giving input for the whole community. So that would be very much appreciated. So that's the one question. I don't know if you want.
yeah, and I just want to, and I appreciate that feedback, especially with the parent square component, because what we do internally, we push out through our employee newsletters. So that'll be an area for us to improve. But we also post in the SUSD source, which is our SUSD blog. But something that just came to my mind is maybe we should also be giving it to SPC, and then you all can be pushing it out. You can announce it here at your meetings.
So if I were to like put together maybe like a how-to, could you make sure that
Yes.
it's accurate, and then I could share that to parents too? Okay,
Yep.
so we could compile resources and help.
Because
them
we
out.
do the source, or for example, more of a niche, but Cheyenne, we're participating right now in a K-5 math curriculum adoption. Donna, Carly, and I went to a PTO meeting, and we presented at a PTO meeting that we were launching the committee, and that if you were applying, save the date type thing. And then what we've also done is we have written blurbs for their PTO newsletter. So last week at Cheyenne, they had their, I think it's PTO Exec Council meeting. So we gave the principal language to provide, and then she also included that same language in her parent newsletter, because I think if you're not part of PTO, you don't get the same communication. So that's something that perhaps we should be doing for every school, to say, principals, put this in your monthly newsletter, add this to your parents' square notification.
No, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The other question I had, so I hear a lot across the country where, especially in high schools actually, so administration in high schools is looking into the businesses around the high schools to actually give input on what needs to be taught in high school, so that kids not necessarily have to go to college, but could find really well-paid jobs in the businesses. And I can give you some great podcasts I listen to. But I was wondering, would it be possible for the adoption committee to really reach out to businesses in Scottsdale and Phoenix and Tempe and get input from these people on especially high school adoption curriculum? So that was the other suggestion.
I do appreciate that. What we do, but again, another layer for further community outreach, often with our high school adoptions, we do reach out to our community college or ASU partners, where we have professors who serve. So last year on physics, we had a college professor serving on our physics adoption, but we haven't necessarily reached out to the business community. So again, that could be something that we try to advertise better through our communications department. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Quick question about the approved list for ELA vendors. Who compiles that list and who approves that list? You said it was state approved, but who does that? Yeah.
The Department of Education.
Okay. But who compiles? Yeah.
Yes, what they have done, and what's really interesting right now is the state is re-reviewing everything that they have approved. So, which made us very nervous, and every other district that was going through an adoption right now, because, I went to the director and said, we're going through an adoption right now, and you're saying what we're adopting may not be approved in the future. Two things. One, we will be grandfathered in, and which will be fine because we're going through it at this time. And two, I really am very confident what we have will definitely make it through. But what they're doing right now is they're re-reviewing everything to go with something called ESSA. ESSA is there's levels of what's called ESSA, and they're levels of evidence-based research. And they're double checking to make sure right now all of the ELA curriculums are at least a ESSA level tier 3. It can go all the way up to tier 4. But unfortunately, sometimes something gets through that might be just someone's uncle's best friend. No, I'm kind of making that up. But what they want to do is make sure what everyone across Arizona is doing is giving the best materials. So they are, and it's the Department of Ed, and there's about 8 of them, and they're reviewing all of the S's, and then what ESSA reports, they're going to resubmit and post this spring, within the next probably maybe by May, which are the new approved ones moving forward. If you're not on the list, you're going to have to explain to the State Department why you're not on the list. And moving forward, if you are going through an adoption, it will have to, those are kind of like the minimum. And then as a community, we make the decision of that list. And it's probably about 25 curriculum vendors long.
And then beyond the ELA, that will have a state board recommendation, working with our purchasing department and our curriculum resources. That's where we have all of the different vendor lists. And again, as I mentioned, also when there is a curriculum like the AP Japanese that just doesn't have a lot of materials, we do the digging because we want to find out where are high-performing districts getting their resources from. What is that looking like? What are we hearing positively about a product so that we can reach out to that vendor and say, can you please submit for review?
So are all the school districts across the state, not just SUSD, working off the same vendor list then, based on the department, the Arizona Department?
For ELA, one would think, but not necessarily. And that is something that we also do. So let's say that I'm going to make up a name that I'm just going to call it the ABC. Let's say we don't currently have any product from ABC, and we've never heard about ABC Company, it's just emerged. But pretend Deer Valley is going through a curriculum adoption, and they are talking about this ABC product that is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Then we'll look at their documents online to learn about it. One of our coaches will call their coach and say, hey, you guys just adopted this ABC. We've never even heard about this. Tell us about it. Then we can reach out to that ABC company and say, you aren't on our list. Can you submit? So you are able to work outside of the For us, we are. For beyond ELA. ELA has move on when reading restrictions. But I also should clarify, once we launch the selection process, we are recruiting for participation, then when we send out our letters, we give them a deadline. They have to notify us within 2 weeks if they're going to be participating. And then 2 weeks after that, we have to receive product. So if 12 weeks down the line, somebody says, oh, but hey, I just heard about such and such. No, our timeline is done. It would not be fair to other vendors to then begin random solicitation. We don't do that. We can't do that.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I was just curious, are you all involved in the teacher training process after the curriculum has been accepted?
Yes. So we mentioned how the warehouse gets really busy. So do our coaches and our reps. And Diane can give an example with the work that begins in February.
Well, I even started it last month. I've gone around now to every school, and I have met with all the I've started with 5th and 4th. I'm working my way down, but I'm meeting with every single teacher, talking to them about the new adoption, what changes, and a really important part, I've been doing a lot of research on implementation, is you have to be very specific talking about what to de-implement. So I've been telling teachers, moving forward, this is what we will be implementing. This is what we will de-implement as well. So I'm having those conversations. I'll continue with K3, and then every single teacher will start going through lots of training, and that will be our focus, not only this initial year, but every year after that. And everything will go back to what, if we have a strong tier 1, everything we talk about needs to keep going back to how does our tier 1 materials that we just adopted reinforce really good vocabulary strategies or really good comprehension. So everything will tie back to that. But it's very large, very big, very robust, and very exciting.
And also, in addition to the professional development that begins, curriculum mapping begins, or often our materials come with the textbook, but then it also comes with click here to watch this video on how to light your Bunsen burner. We're gonna watch the video on how to light the Bunsen burner. Or Michael serves on a novel review committee. So we have been reviewing for 3 years novels that complement our middle school and high school English language arts curriculum. So 3 years ago, new curriculum was adopted. The stories in the book, great, ready to go. Now we have been reading all of the novels to see if we believe that those novels that are aligned with those units are appropriate for our classrooms. And then those novels, those are considered supplementals, go to the governing board for governing board approval. So we give a recommendation of the books that we would like to purchase as part of the product that the board has approved.
In terms of the ELA adoption, I heard that, Diane, that you gave a great meeting at Anasazi, and I was wondering if there are any plans on talking to parents in the community about the changes so that we can help support them at home, like on the science of reading.
Are you talking about the Anasazi Parent Night?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like, could you do something like that for the community, the greater community?
Really great question, and you're putting some seeds in my brain about that. I don't know if I can get to all 18 of the schools to be able to do it in a timely manner, but maybe I can, just your school, okay. You bet. I love to do this kind of stuff. So yes, thank you for putting that in my mind. So maybe I can do more of this for parents and communities. I'm also thinking when through not only this spring and this summer, we can get some things so when you go to your first parent night and you meet the teacher in the fall, your teachers will have maybe a little PowerPoint that goes in and talks all about the curriculum as well. So there would be a consistent message. So just off the top of the head, that's the first way I can kind of think of maybe a consistent message. But if you have any other ideas of how I can support everyone knowing what a great curriculum we have, let me know. I definitely could, yeah. Okay, so 5, you bet, you bet. I'd love to do that. No, I'd love to do that. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Pardon? Thank you, I will. You probably have to be the people talking about it with every, talking about it.
Thank you both so much. That was a really informative and helpful presentation. Okay, so the rest of the meeting, we have a few executive board updates. The first one is our budget report. Monthly recurring email came out, and we did have an individual donation come in as well. Okay, so all of you reps should have had an email from me. Every 2 years, SPC audits our financial accounts, and I need 2 to 3 volunteers from the parent rep community to help on this committee. The committee will review the past 2 years of SPC's finances and then write a report to share at a future general meeting. We have a template from the last time this was done 2 years ago, so not starting from scratch. Anyway, and I don't anticipate it'll be a ton of time. If you're interested, please either come talk to me after the meeting, send me an email, and I'll also be reaching out again online because I need at least 2 to 3 volunteers. Yeah. Okay, so speaking of finances, SPC is a 501c3. We rely on donations to cover our operating costs. Our biggest operating cost is actually the liability insurance that lets us reserve this space and have meetings like the ones you just listened to. We really have something for every parent. Just topics of general meetings that have happened this year, right? You heard about curriculum adoption. We recently had one on student mental health, school safety. We have a meeting every year on school safety with kind of a different focus. We've trying to make it easy to donate. You can do check, PayPal, and Venmo, and we also have a web page. And you'll be hearing more about this in digital text communications from us as well. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to point out, so we have something for every parent. We also have something for every level of engagement, right? You can come here to these meetings. You can ask Dr. Menzel a question to his face. You can listen to these presentations and ask questions. You can also watch from home on YouTube. And you can watch later, right, because it's recorded on YouTube as well. Okay, upcoming dates. We have our next general meeting in February here. It's an evening meeting, so it'll be Wednesday, February 22nd at 6 o'clock in the evening. We're working on scheduling the topics, so you'll be hearing about that soon, but it'll be great. And then we also have an upcoming PTO roundtable at the end of February, also here in this room. That's a Wednesday morning. Doors will open at 9:15. The roundtable will start at 9:30. And I'll give a hint of what the topics are because we haven't totally nailed all of them down yet. One of them will be fundraising and one of them will be gardening. And the speaker for that is super amazing and knowledgeable. At least one of the speakers is. There might be more than one. Okay. Do any reps have any announcements? All right, as always, if you need anything, that's your one-stop shop email. I can direct you where you need to go, get information, any questions, suggestions, please send it. Thank you so much.